Education shouldn't be a commodity in order to transactionally exchange that afterwards for a career or a job, but that learning is a value in and of itself, right? And that the end goal is growth.
Welcome back to the You Need a Counselor podcast. This is a show presented by Heart and Solutions Counseling Agency. We release new episodes every Sunday at 5 p.m. Central and encourage you to batch up that laundry, put away the dishes, plan for the week ahead, or do any other task that might seem daunting while you give our show a listen. You might just be encouraged to call your therapist, connect with this week's guest, or seek out those services you've been considering for a while but haven't made the commitment to yet. If you are in the state of Iowa and are in need of mental or behavioral health counseling, give us a call at 1-800-531-4236. Enjoy the show.
Hello, and welcome back to You Need a Counselor podcast. My name is Dr. Julie Johnson. I'm the president and founder here at Heart and Solutions Mental Health and Behavioral Health Counseling in Iowa.
I'm Tenesha. I'm a mental health and wellness advocate. I currently reside in Illinois. I'm from Chicago, and I'm very passionate about mental health and wellness.
And I'm Chrissa Hunt. I am the Vice President at Heart and Solutions in charge of our Behavioral Health Department. And this is our podcast, You Need a Counselor. So we are designed for people curious about counseling, but have barriers keeping them from experiencing the benefits of counseling. Our mission is to share stories about counseling, good, bad, and indifferent, and spread the message that everyone can benefit from mental health and behavioral health counseling services.
Our guest today is Holly Bot, and Holly's a returning guest. You'll remember her from the episode Mental Health and Incarceration. Holly is an IT solution architect at Bot Consulting, and Holly's journey is just very, very inspiring. She had gone in 2010. Her entire life was deterred, and she found herself in prison for a long sentence and having no experience with the criminal justice system, no experience with what it's like in prison and what to do in prison and how to cope with this sentence, really challenged Holly to have to find those internal resources and have to find that internal strength to not only cope with this prison sentence, but also to thrive within it. And the lessons that Holly learned, the self-discovery that Holly was able to do through that process is just so inspiring to all of us. I'm so excited to have Holly back on the show today. And I'm also even more excited to learn that she is now in her counseling program to be a biblical counselor. She has completed a personal training certification. She is almost done with her biblical counseling year-long certification and is getting her degree in counseling with a fitness minor. So amazing, because we talk about IT solution architect, and I think that's amazing work, but we need more counselors in this field. And my goodness, I'm so excited to invite Holly into the field. So welcome, Holly. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that great introduction, too.
So now, give us a little update now on, because the last time we talked to you, you were not in school for counseling. So tell us what is happening. How did this happen?
Well, my husband is in school getting a bachelor's degree. And so in kind of helping him, he's incarcerated. And so I help and advocate for what he's doing. I was investigating not long after our last podcast together, some things about school and FAFSA. And I discovered that this past year in Minnesota, they passed a law where anyone without a bachelor's degree, even if you don't qualify for a Pell Grant, you can receive a free education at a Minnesota university. So there's like 30 of them at no cost. And I thought, well, why wouldn't I do that? Maybe I'll join him at school. And so I made some investigation into that and really felt it was a good fit. I had already started some certifications on the side in biblical counseling and personal training because that was just an interest of mine. So the ability to take it further for a bachelor's degree, maybe even a master's or more, um, encouraged me. So I started last fall at Metro State University in getting an official degree in those things. It's interesting to be back at school,
Oh
but I
yeah.
do like it. Yeah.
Awesome. And so you're doing biblical counseling and personal training, things that maybe not everybody would think go together. Do you plan to include them, like doing physical fitness in your counseling, or what is your kind of goal with those things?
Well, I'm not sure yet. I haven't. I'm doing it because I can, and it's because, and so I'm kind of letting the education that I get um, drive and focus decisions like that might not be entirely clear. Now, there is actually a lot of overlap between personal training and fitness, generally speaking, and counseling, because people who want a personal trainer or to improve their health, right? Nutrition's involved and also behavior change is involved. And behavior change is what counseling is all about. So, in a very limited aspect, there are some data gathering overlaps. There's motivational interviewing that's involved in both in order to help that person uncover their real motivations in order to drive change. And unless you do those things, they won't have health changes. They might have temporary gains, but it won't be a new habit, a new lifestyle. So I was really interested in the overlap of those two. And I really think mental health uh, issues can be very detrimental physically. I remember when I had clinical depression, not brushing my teeth for more than a year. And it wasn't because it was too hard, it was almost an internal destructive behavior. Um, I didn't put that type of thought into it, but I could feel myself, I was being mean to myself on purpose. And of course, that caused horrible damage to my teeth and other aspects of my body. Napping for 20 hours a day is not good for your body. And so just addressing the whole person. Not everybody who needs a counselor needs to make fitness or health changes, but I would say many do.
So, I was listening to you talking back to school. What is the end goal on your certifications and degrees? Like, um, what's the end goal or your plan once you obtain all these different certifications and degrees?
I do not have one yet. I um it's interesting that the college that I'm at, Metro State U, which has been around for a long time, and I'm my major is the College of Individualized Studies, which means make your own degree plan where you find a gap in there just generally. And they really believe that careers or education shouldn't be a commodity in order to transactionally exchange that afterwards for a career or a job, but that learning is a value in and of itself, right? And that the end goal is growth. And I completely agree with all of that. Certainly, there will be uses for what I am doing. But I think if you don't learn what you love, then you're going to be disappointed with the career you get after, anyways, because you didn't love it to begin with for the sake of that's really what's in your heart. So just gonna wait and see.
I love that. I mean, it takes courage to jump into something like that. I mean, going to school in any capacity is a lot of work. It's a lot of time. It's a lot of mental energy, and going into that with the idea of I want to learn. I want to learn about these subjects, absolutely, but I also want to learn about myself. And I want to learn about myself as I interact with these subjects. How do I think about these things?
Yeah.
What's my perspective on these different things that I'm learning about that's going to be totally different from the other 20 people in my class? And it takes so much courage to do that, but the reward side of that is the personal fulfillment of knowing, okay, I did this for me. This
Yeah.
is something I did for me. And we don't usually think about education as being self-care, right? We think of
It is.
education as like another thing to do, another task,
Mm-hmm.
that's like that next checkbox I have to, check off my list and all of that. But when we go into it for that pure purpose of
Mm-hmm.
I am a human being, and as human beings, we need to be exploring. We need to be
Mm-hmm.
learning. We need to be putting ourselves in new situations so we see
Yes.
different facets of ourselves. I think it's so beautiful. And when I started my degree in counseling, I had said, well, I want to work in criminal justice. That was my thing. My undergrad was in criminal justice. I had no idea. And so would I have been able to say, this is the trajectory, that I think my career will absolutely not. There's no way I would have said, right? Doing a podcast in 2024 would be what I'd be doing at this moment in
Yeah.
time. There's no way I could have thought that. Um, and so I think that what you're doing is so beautiful. And when I did my doctorate as well, people were like, why are you getting that though? Right? Like, what are you going to do with that degree? And I said, I like behavioral health leadership. Like, that's what I'm reading about while it's a Sunday afternoon and I'm on the couch reading. Like, those are the things I'm reading about or listening to. So I'm just going to learn as much as I can about it. And that's so similar to what you're doing, just finding that next connection between
Yeah.
yourself and the material. I think it's so beautiful. So
Yeah.
what has that transition back to school been like for you then? Because you're an entrepreneur, you're doing all kinds of things that are like your own self-directed things. What's that been like going back into school?
It's interesting. I think I have maybe an advantage, but certainly a different point of view than some of the younger students. At Metro State, um, it is an older population. There's no dorms, it's not residential, and it's mainly people returning to school, but there are some young people just out of high school there. And for for the program that I'm in, well, actually for any major at Metro State, they provide the option to make your own class. If there's a class you want to take and they don't have it, then you author it and you come up with your own learning objectives. You partner with a professor, and it's a one-on-one relationship with that professor where they have some familiarity with the topic, but it's not a currently taught subject or whatever. So then they walk side by side with you and check in with you, and you learn what you really want to learn, and there is a real ownership over your education when you decide to go this route. So for example, um, it's a public school, public college, so they don't have biblical counseling. That's a theological, they might have religion, but that's a totally different thing, the study of human religion. And so, but I thought this is where it's free. So I'm going to get biblical counseling here. And so let's do that. And so they paired me with one of the psychology professors. And together we're doing a study this semester, comparisons and contrasts of cognitive behavior therapy, traditional cognitive behavior therapy, client centered therapy, and different, I guess, traditional methods and techniques, and comparing that with biblical framework. What does that look like? And just having that journey to learn about both in parallel and see where they might meet and where they're completely different, almost like a research, project kind of thing, just for fun. And I think I am not a note taker. I have to be honest. In the first semester, there was a class where they gave a textbook and it was heavy reading. And I think I got to chapter 4 and I was done. Can't, and I never took a single note. Um, and this time every morning I'm getting up, I'm getting right into textbooks, I'm taking notes, pages after pages. I have a notebook, so it just shows the more it means to me, right? And I'm getting more out of it. So that's kind of what my journey has been like. Metro State also has a thriving reentry program, and they teach incarcerated persons at the prison. So my husband attends Metro State, and some of my teachers are his teachers. And so they'll teach me on campus, and then they'll drive down to the prison and teach him. And so they know us both, and that has been such an interesting way for us. We'll be married 2 years in May, and we've known each other for 6 years. He was incarcerated that entire time. He's been incarcerated since 2011. And often, when a person has a marriage that one of them is incarcerated for an extended period of time, your lives can really diverge. And the only way you have connection is by self-reporting. And it limits your ability to see that person from the point of view of what others think, right? With their own interaction, unless it happens in the visiting room, right? And so I remember the first day I walked into the college, there was a reentry meeting. These are all formerly incarcerated people in various years of the college there. And we were going to introduce ourselves. And there were also advisors and coordinators and some of the professors that were doing this sitting around. So we went around and introduced ourselves. And the guy next to me said, I am a coordinator and I go out to the prisons and whatnot. And he mentioned the prisons, and I was my turn next, but instead I looked at him. I says, well, I bet you know my husband. And he said, well, who's your husband? And I said, Corbin Bot. And everyone's head in the room popped up, all the professors and the teachers, and they said, we love him. I'm so excited to meet you. I remember when he was getting married to you, the weeks leading up, he was so excited. And so that they had known him for years, and now I got to see how they valued him, and they get to know me. So that has been an extra fun spot of being at this college, is that dual aspect of it.
Oh, cool. That is interesting. I know you talked about, and I never really thought about that. Yeah, you're not seeing the day-to-day things your husband's doing. So unless he tells you, you don't know what's going on. So how kind of
Right.
is that relationship? I'm sure it's difficult, but has there been, I mean, it's helpful that you guys go to the same school, so you do have that connection now too. But how have you guys kind of coped with that, those struggles of kind of being like long distance, kind of, because you're not able to
Yeah.
see each other daily?
Yes. So we do talk every day on the phone, unless there's something that happens at the prison that prevents it. And we visit every week, usually 2 days a week, 2 hours each visit. But what has really, I think, helped our relationship is the fact that I was incarcerated for 8 years in the same state, right? And so he doesn't need to explain things to me, sometimes out of habit, because he's so used to explaining prison culture in order to provide a backstory so that the real meaning of his story has more value. He'll just do that to me out of habit. And I'll be like, why are you explaining prison to me? You don't need to tell me about prison. Just tell me what happened. And he'll be like, oh, yeah, that's right. But there have been also times where, you know, every person is going to have an interpretation of an experience, and sometimes our interpretations are faulty out of selfish reasoning or defense mechanisms. And so he'll tell me something that happened, and I will kind of check him on that. And I don't think any other wife could do that. And I'll give you an example that just happened this month. His living unit was locked down for a week, which means nobody's let out of their room. So he didn't call me for a week. Our visits were canceled by the prison. So when we finally were able to visit next, I said, what happened? He said, well, something went missing, like a tablet. They have special prison tablets, and the tablet went missing, and they said they're not letting us out till they find it. And he said, it's odd. There was a tablet sitting on one of the day room common area tables for a couple days. And we all kept asking, whose is it? Whose is it? Nobody knew. And then one day it vanished. And then he went on to talk about how this is all the prison's fault and who else could have been. And I said, why didn't anybody bring the tablet to a guard? He says, well, we're not allowed to touch other people's stuff. I says, could you have told the guard, come here and look at this thing? Yeah, I guess. I said, so really you were locked down because you have an accountability problem or maybe a responsibility problem? He's like, yeah, but if I hadn't been in prison, I probably wouldn't have been able to call him on that. So that helps. But in other more positive ways, it helps. I remember when we first met, and he was much like I had been in prison, feeling isolated and bad, basically, and not much respected, right, because of being a criminal and being in this place. And so he would call me. And when you call from prison, you have to stand in a line and wait your turn. Sometimes 45 minutes for one 15-minute call. And you don't get to sit down, you have to stand there at the phone. And behind you is a crowd of people all waiting their turn, some of them fighting, literally fighting for their turn. Is just chaotic. And so I was so impressed that he was willing to go through that, to talk to me several times a day. And I told him that, and he was actually speechless that I recognized that just making phone calls, which is so simple for you or for me, was an act of love for him. So, yeah.
It's so interesting to get your perspective on that because I don't have family members who's incarcerated, and I've always like supported them throughout their incarceration. And I even had one of my kids at one point incarcerated. So just to know like some of the culture, because sometimes you worry about things like that. I know growing up, my uncle had like a 22-year prison sentence. So as a kid, I remember going all around Illinois to all the different prisons, visiting him. It seemed like
Yep.
I used to tell my grandmother, I felt like he was at every prison. Like as I got older, I'm like, I know I haven't been to all these Illinois prisons. But if a person got a long prison stay, they can be moved around a lot depending on what the situation is, or if
Yep.
their life is in danger or anything like that. So um, just to have a better understanding and compassion of, like you say, the phone calls and I didn't heard loved ones say like, oh, I had to stand in line for like an hour to get to the phone, or just say if it's close to a holiday, they like, oh, I don't feel like fighting about this phone. So it just gives me a little more perspective on that part. Cause it's like, I'm like fighting for the phone. Like, cause you think everything is like what you see on TV, but clearly, I mean, if you dealt with somebody or have a loved one that's incarcerated, and then just going on the visits, like how much that means to them and
Mhm.
things like that. So um, I'm aware of that. I just love that perspective because it helps me to understand on the outside, like when it does come to like the phone calls or they definitely express their gratitude for the visits and things like that. But it just gives a little more perspective. And how was it your reentry like into the world? Like, I'm not sure if I was aware of like how much time you did and then just getting reacquainted back with the world because I'm sure technology changed, things changed and things like that. How was that for you?
Yeah, so I was given a 12-year prison sentence. In Minnesota at that time, you automatically served 2/3 and were then released. And the only way that that would change was misbehavior in prison of a severe degree could extend it past that 2/3. And so I served 8 years total and went in the beginning of 2011 and left at the end of 2018. So for me, a couple of things I can think of is I had been in IT the computer programming and things before I went in. And that's a living language just as much as English or any spoken language. It evolves. And 8 years out of the loop is a long time. It's technology just changes so much. And so the field that I really loved, I didn't feel competent to reenter, at least not immediately. And that was a little sad for me because at the time I found value in self-value in employment, what I could do, or being smart, right? Solving problems. And I'm not being able to do that in that same way and feel good. Um, so I just went, I picked an easy job at first. I moved from prison to my parents' house. And they were very supportive. I lived there for a couple years while I just got back on my feet. I wanted to buy a house again. So I just stayed there until I could buy a house. And then I did. Um, what was also, I think, really helpful for my reentry is I have 5 children. When I went into prison, they were 16, 11, 10, 8, and 4. And when I got out of prison, they were all adults except for the younger two. And those they were teens. So my second son was 19 when I got out of prison. And when I went to prison, my husband moved out of Minnesota to Seattle and took the kids with him. And then they moved back to Minnesota as they became adults. And so my son had moved in with my parents the year before I got out of prison. And during that year, he became involved in going to jail. He got into a relationship where they were abusive to each other, and this resulted in him being arrested and going to jail twice. And so by the time, and he was jailed in the very same jail I had been in. And that was very interesting because my ex-husband, this not my current husband, this is my last husband, he was very angry with me for going to prison, leaving him with the kids, just you name it, right? And rightfully so. But he told the kids day in, day out what an awful person I was, just a monster and all these things. And my kids loved me. However, they're trying to filter what they feel and know with what he's saying, very conflicting messages. And so my second son, when he went to jail in the same jail I was in, the first time you do it, you can say that was a fluke, right? I'm not like mom. I'm not like people who go to jail. The second time you end up there and you have an even longer time to do, you have to start reevaluating. Are people just people who make mistakes? Was mom maybe just like me, surprised to find herself here? And so when I got out of prison, he had just gotten out of jail the week before and was back at my parents' house. And now I was at my parents' house and we were living there together, which I was so grateful for. Because, I was a stay-at-home mom or a work-at-home mom. And I thought I would never get to live with my kids again. And now here I am living with my son again. He's got a bedroom down the hall from me. And we had good talks where he really um, I don't think my children should need to apologize for anything related to my own incarceration, but he did apologize for having maybe some wrong ideas that kept him from having a better relationship with me. And those ideas had been reconstructed during his time in Minnesota. So that helped my reentry in living with my parents, living in community with my son, having that compassionate empathy from him, which was very healing for both of us, really, and for our relationship. And then, the rest is just starting to find your new place in the world. There's another student at Metro State. He's working on his third master's degree before he starts his PhD program this fall, and it's all in incarcerated experience type thing, higher education in prison and the like. And something he said to me was so interesting. He said, before you go to prison, you have your own tools that serve you well. You have integrated with your society. You do this, you know to expect that. And right. You go to prison and you're in a culture you've never heard of, that you are not prepared for. It has its own language, its own experiences, its own hierarchy, and tools that served you before will not serve you here. And so you have to redefine all of that. And after a while, you've got that figured out. You have new tools, they're serving you well, and then you're released. And it's not like pre-prison. So the tools you have had from the last two experiences, pre-prison and prison, will not serve you now. Try getting a job in the medical field. Like, good luck. And so, or just try explaining your most recent job history as all prison jobs and see how that helps you get the next job. So you need, again, all new tools to serve you once again based on your new reality, your new identity. Really, what it is you're over and over redefining your identity and finding tools to use those. So that was a lot of what came next for me, is finding new tools to serve me in my next phase of life.
Wow, and thank you for sharing that about your relationship with your son and how that changed as you were released. Because what a beautiful healing journey for your son to go through. I don't think um, people don't always understand about, when there's is a separation of parents, and if one parent talks negatively about the other parent, or if they both do, oh my gosh, the damage that does for that child is incredible, because children internalize that. They go, well, if dad thinks this about mom, I'm half that. That's half of me that dad thinks that about. And
Mm-hmm.
children internalize that, and they don't cognitively internalize that. They just do it as they're developing their identities. And so if our identity is like a tree that kind of grows up, it grows up around these pieces of, well, my family, my closest people to me have disdain for this part of me. I need to protect this part of me. Oh, they've got disdain for this part of me. I've got to protect that part of me, and not let it out, not share it, not develop it. And so those pieces that were growing around get stunted and blocked. And so then with your son being able to hear your story, get to know you again, understand, and have that empathy towards you, it's healing those parts of himself where he wasn't allowed to give himself that empathy growing up for those pieces of
Yeah.
himself. That's just it's beautiful. And so I don't think that gets talked about enough. It just in general or in parenting classes, because anybody can be a parent, and we don't have to take classes about this. So it's just so important that those messages that we're sharing about, our children's other parent. It's incredible the amount
Mm-hmm.
that takes to heal as an adult. And I also loved what you said about new identities each time, your identity before, and then you evolve for your identity, because what it speaks to me, and what I think it speaks for your future in the counseling field, is that we as humans are adaptable. We are adaptable. There is nothing that's set in stone. We are the pieces of us that come to the forefront in any given moment and situation are the pieces of us that come to the forefront in that situation. And when we're in a different situation, other pieces of ourselves are going to come to the forefront, and our identity is just constantly shifting. And what a strength that is! What a
Mm-hmm.
blessing that is, that we are able to adapt and form that way. But I'm curious about as you were incarcerated and you felt like, okay, the things in my previous identity which were like high achiever, right? Problem solver, get it done, right? Super mom, those kinds of labels that you had on yourself before, and then taking those off and going, oh, I can't overachieve my way right through this. I how did that benefit you? What did you learn about taking off those pieces of ourselves that so many of us are kind of stuck in chasing all the time?
So it was interesting because uh, no one tells you in advance you're going to lose your identity as you know it when you go to prison. And so I didn't even realize that that was going to happen. One of the most important identities to me was, you mentioned supermom. So being a stay-at-home, work-at-home mom, and just managing my children's lives and caring about them. And they were all young, as I've mentioned. So my oldest was 16, so I guess I'd been doing it for 16 years so far, but my youngest was 4. So I was expecting more than a decade of this in my future. And now all of that was taken away because with an 8-year prison sentence, my 4-year-old would be almost 13 and the rest of them would be adults, right? And so when that hit home for me as an actual reality, it was like my old life died. I don't want to say it was like my children died, but it was like everything. It was a grief unimaginable. And it was literally incomprehensible to me. And so I went through a period of, I felt like I was a non-person, like I had literally been wiped clean of everything. And it was so traumatic. I started wetting the bed at night. So just extreme trauma in thinking about these things. And some of the manifestations of seeing this in action, if you were to have watched me, was before I went to prison, I did everything for the needs of 6 other people, my husband and 5 children. Someone needs to go to school. Someone needs to go to soccer practice. Oh, you need medicine. Like if I got up, it was because someone else needed something, right? And so in prison, the other women would say, hey, do you want to go outside with me? And to be honest, I didn't know the answer. Do I? Do I like going outside? How do I know? Does someone need me there? And so it was a real struggle for me. So what I started doing was, since I didn't know the answer, do I want to go here? Do I want to go there? I would just go and then try to soak in the experience and figure out if I was glad that I went. And it took a year or two, at least, for me to begin to form, I'm going outside. I don't need to be invited because I want to go there. Right. And it's so bizarre that that can actually be a challenge, but it was. And so I came into my own during that 8 years of, I began to realize who I was as a person apart from anyone else. Right. And that was very helpful to me then leaving prison, because if you're super dependent on your identity as attached to career jobs or others, then if those things are taken away, you'll flounder. And I think that really helped my reentry then. So,
Yeah, definitely. That's super interesting. And I would like to know more about like parenting from prison too. I'm sure like obviously a big change, like you said, and then the kids moved across the country to Seattle. Were you able to be in contact with them? I'm sure like visitation probably wasn't as common when they were across the country. But what was that experience like?
so my oldest son is from my first marriage. I'm on my third marriage. And then the younger 4 were from my second marriage. And so when my second husband took the kids to Washington, he took his 4. And my oldest son, who at that point was 17, was like, screw you, I'm living with grandma and grandpa. And so he stayed here. And my parents lived not far from the prison. So they brought him all the time. And he turned 18 right after. And then came on his own. He'd come after school because his school was also close to the prison. He'd come by himself and visit me. He was so proud he could do that. One thing that was really interesting with him is between his junior and senior year of high school, he joined the Army and they put him in boot camp that summer. And he wrote me every day from boot camp. And I still have his letters. In fact, I read his letters in one of my podcast episodes. And his letters said things like, I sure miss home, and talking about the authority and all of this. And then he said, you know what? I'm beginning to understand what it's like for you in prison, or what it was like for you to first go there, because of all of the changes he was experiencing. And that whole experience for him really allowed him to have empathy. And I felt, because no one in my family had been to prison or jail at that point, like no one understood what I was going through. It's a lonely feeling. And so my son, at least, was having some of that could relate. And that felt very good for both of us. It deepened our connection. For the younger four, I've always been a person who felt a high level of agency and also assertiveness and even ownership over certain things that were important to me. And that included my kids. And so I thought, if me going to prison has had harmful effects on them, I want to mitigate that as much as possible, as much as it depends upon me, right? I don't want to make it worse. And so I wrote them all five of them, a letter every week, and not just a one pager, right? A couple pages. Called them every week. Even if they didn't answer because of whatever reason, I still called. Sometimes they would go through personal struggles and not answer for a couple months, and I still called because I want them to see it's their choice, not me choosing not to. And I became really creative with ways to stay engaged with them so that they would not be bored, because I had email, letter writing, gift sending, or phone calls. So one example of being creative was I went to the library. I picked out a book for each of them based on their interests, their developmental level. And then I would call them before they went to school, and each one got 15 minutes of their book read out loud, where they could just listen. And it was a good way to take the pressure off of them of talking, or me, right? Not a lot going on where I am. And still share this 15 minutes and have a nice time. And then when it came to letter writing, for example, we would do the never ending story. I would write a paragraph and mail it. They would add their own paragraph, mail it back. I would add a paragraph, and pretty soon we had this story. So just a lot of interactive ways to be fun with my kids, so that I could stay close to them. One thing I did find, because they were so far away, is I did not get regular pictures, photos. And you can change a lot between age 11 and 19, right? You don't even look like the same person. So sometimes as several years went by and I finally got a picture, I did not recognize my own kids. Like I literally didn't even recognize them. And I wasn't sure which one was which in the photos. Two of my boys are 15 months apart. Which one is which? And that was tragic for me. And so when I dreamt at night, I would dream I wasn't in prison. I was going to Target. I was doing errands. The kids were with me, and they were always the age when I went to prison. They were not growing up in my dreams. And when I talked to them on the phone, I could hear their voices changing, but I still pictured in my head the little kid. So what I started doing, because I was really worried that I would become disconnected emotionally for them, that bond might be broken. And I'm an artist, so I started drawing their portraits from the pictures that I was getting. And these take hours, and I would be really careful. And they were like life size. And so weirdly enough, and I didn't know that this would happen, once I started doing that, my kids started growing up in my dreams, and they looked like the drawings I had done, or the age So so that when I got out of prison, I wasn't shocked to see them because they had progressed based on this. So kind of an art therapy, which is another reason counseling, another aspect of counseling that's so interesting for me. It's literally mentally healing, not just a fun exercise. It will restore memories and things like this. So anyways, that's a lot of how I parented from prison. And then just I am still mom, right? I remember when I first got to prison, I don't know, I've been there a month or two, and my kids were arguing in the background while I'm on the phone with one of them. And so then he complains to me. So the one who's arguing comes and I said, go to your room. And he went. Like, how am I going to enforce that? But he just didn't even question. He just went to his room, you know. So I don't know. That helped. All of those things helped.
So my question for you would be, um, what do you feel the best ways that can help someone who is re-entering the world again? Like how can friends and family support them as they try to navigate back into life, especially if you've been gone, 7, 8 years? Like, what is that like? And then two, I just want to add this comment. It's like I know um, someone who has been incarcerated for like 7 years and they re-entering into the world. And, like I know you have all these ambitions and things that you want to do, but I always tell this individual, you have to pace yourself. Like you've been gone, 7 years, you have kids pulling on you, family pulling on you, you get a job and everybody think you can do everything. And it's like, hold on, wait, like they just got here. Like everything is all new. Technology is, they trying to figure out how to work a cell phone. They trying to figure out, okay, a work schedule. And then you have that, like you say, that parental guilt because you haven't been there for 7 years. So now your kids is kind of like using that in a manipulative way a bit to make, to get you to do different things for them. And you just have to like you can feel super overwhelmed. Like I know like
Mm-hmm.
the individual I'm talking about when he just wanted to like throw the cell phone away. He got tired of people call like it was just too much too fast. And I get it. Like I got it. I was very patient with them and just let him just do things in his timing because it was just feeling like so much. And he really appreciated like my patience with him. He was like, oh, I wish, my family, thought like you thought. He said, everybody thinks like, oh, you've been home 30 days. You can do this. And he like, no, like I'm still trying to figure it out. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
if you can just kind of explain for someone um who have friends and family that's coming home, like what does that support look like that's needed from friends and family to be able to support them better?
Well, you have it exactly right that pacing is so important. Um, there were plenty of women in prison who had been out and gotten back to prison, and they would provide information on their experiences on reentry to help inform the rest of us. And one message that was constantly given to us was when you're making your to-do list of things you need to do when you first get out, pace yourself really slow. And I thought, okay, so I made a list and I thought just one thing per day. Like this day I'll open a bank account, this day I'll get a cell phone, and so forth. And I thought, if all I have to do in a whole day is get a bank account, like that'll take 30 minutes. And so that's really slow, right? And yet that was too much. And I started developing like facial twitches from stress, like my eyelid just flicked. So that surprised me that even that was too fast. And I come to think of it this way now, there are people who go through horrific long experiences. I think of the guy who's been a prisoner in Afghanistan for over 800 days, the American. And they say he's at a guest house, but we know he's not at a guest house and he's not being treated well. If he got out, people wouldn't be like, get back to life. We know you can do stuff. We have responsibilities to meet. Haul your part. they would be treating him with kid gloves and treating him as if he was a person who had undergone extensive and repeated trauma, scarring. And this is true of the prison experience, especially in men's prisons, but even in women's. I was strip searched more than 1,000 times, more than 1,000 times in front of strangers. And we're not just talking taking your clothes off, right? Lift your boobs, bend over, spread your butt cheeks, cough. 1,000 times in front of strangers. That is so dehumanizing. And if you have ever been raped or molested, then it is just a reliving of your trauma. There's so many women who don't even want to go have a visit because they'll be strip searched and they can't bear the thought. And that's just one example, right? And then you have angry men guards yelling at you and you're vulnerable and you have to obey or you'll be punished with no visits or no phone calls. That might be repeating a trauma of an abusive parent or something like that. And so after years of this, you're not the same. One thing that happened to me was my face became very schooled in withholding what I'm thinking. Because if you have a serial killer for a roommate and they decide to tell you the TV made them do it, you better respond with, I'm sorry to hear that. You certainly don't want to go, ah! Because you might not make it through the night, right? And so, and that's real. But I remember one of my friends saying to me after I got out, and he was sharing all this update stuff. And he said, and he'd known me since high school, a long time. I won't say how old I am, but a long time ago. And he said, you're not the same person. He said, I'm trying to tell you all this stuff, and you literally have no emotion on your face. It's making me hard to gauge your response and engage with you. And so I intentionally, almost like theater acting, I wasn't pretending my emotions, but I had to be that intentional about responding with my face. I decided to do that for the rest of the conversation. He visibly relaxed and became much more happy. And so that's just a defense mechanism that has still happened. When I first got out of prison, if someone touched me, I'd jump, especially if they came up behind me and touched me. I would just like this, and I would get weird looks for it, So keeping in mind that prison is an ongoing, shocking experience that scars the soul, then they can't jump back into life as if it had never happened. If we had a friend who had been the victim of an attempted murder, we wouldn't say the next day, we'll get back to life, get over it, and start pulling your end. We would give them all sorts of time and consideration. So please do that for people who have come out of prison, especially extensive prison stays like that, because while their body is capable of doing certain things, their mind is still imprisoned, right? They are still dehumanized in a large way. And dehumanization is real. It's an utter numbness, right? Even of your hands, feet, and of your mind, no emotions and limiting thoughts that you don't even see what's right in front of you to do things. So it's a disability almost for a while, anyways, till you recover.
Absolutely. I know that the empathy that you have developed over this amount of time, I'm sure you were an empathetic person before you were incarcerated, but I know that this empathy that you have developed and the coping for wellness that you have developed in yourself is going to really, really impact the work that you're going to do as you're learning about counseling, as you're learning about biblical counseling, as you're putting those pieces together with the personal training and kind of making that holistic wellness world for yourself. You're developing your own classes around it. You're
Yeah.
developing your own kind of niche into the world to, like you said, fill a need that is out there and that you're continuing to explore and identify. So we are so proud of you, Holly. We are so, so proud. I am so excited. When you said you were starting that counseling program and in that counseling program, oh my gosh, I am just so proud of you. I just think it's
Thank you.
amazing. And especially coming from IT, right? Like those feel like very different worlds, IT and counseling. So the fact that you're, open to having all these different pieces of yourself come out into these different fields is just so inspiring, I think, to all of us. So thank you so much for being on the show, Holly. We love having you here. I'd love to have you back in a year so we can hear about what you're doing and where you are in your
Yeah.
degree. I think it'd be amazing. So thank you so much for being here. We love having you as a guest. You can look up Holly Bot at www.hollybot.me, M-E. And you can look at the From Surviving to Living series audiobook. You can also listen to From Surviving to Living Spotlight, where Holly has guests who share their incredible stories and narratives as well. And there's also the blog there, the blog book. So the blog book is on there as well. Just a beautiful, beautiful story. And you model such vulnerability, and I know that that's really, really going to help you help others in the counseling field. So thank you so much for being here, Holly. We appreciate you.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm Holly Bot. I need a counselor.
Awesome.
And I'm Chrissa Hunt.
And I'm Julie Johnson. And we want to thank Tenesha Gatson for being on the show as well. So make sure you check out Spice to Your Life blog as well, because she's always sharing really, really great mental health tips there. And we need a counselor, and so do you.
You.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the You Need a Counselor podcast. We are so grateful that you're here. Now, we want to hear from you. Text us or give us a call at 515-650-3231. You can also find and connect with You Need a Counselor on Facebook and Instagram. If you've enjoyed today's show, please take a moment to like, review, or leave a comment, as all of these things help others to find and benefit from the podcast as well. If you're in the state of Iowa and interested in mental health counseling or behavioral health intervention services, give us a call at 800-531-4236.